All right, welcome to our third part of our series on who is DFS. So I'm so excited to have Jenitza Johnson join us from the Permanency Unit. So we first did investigations with Amanda Kivler, and then we did treatment with Jessica Tyre, and now we're going to finish up with permanency from Jenitza. So Jenitza, go ahead, take it away.
Hey there. So I am going to share my screen. Give me a minute. Let me see.
Perfect.
Okay. Can you guys see
Yep.
my screen? Okay, awesome. So with permanency,
Jenitza, how long
yes.
you been with DFS?
I have been almost 9 years.
Okay.
Almost 9 years. My first 3 years, I was a treatment worker, and then I transferred on over to permanency, and that's where I'm staying. So I've been doing this for quite some time. So Jessica did the treatment piece. So when kids are in care and they've reached that 9-month mark, where the reviews, we have to take the case back to court for a permanency hearing. Before the permanency hearing, the treatment worker is responsible for taking the case to the Permanency Planning Committee, which we call PPC, with a group of the administrators to see if the goal of reunification is still the appropriate goal, or if we need to look at other goals for the youth or the sibling group. So when we take it to PPC, the goals are reunification, which they've already been doing since they've entered care. That's typically the main goal when they enter care. The next goal would be termination of parental rights, TPR, and adoption. The next one, there's permanent guardianship. There's guardianship with the unknown or known resource. And there's another planned permanent living arrangement, which is APLA. So to review what these are, reunification is clearly reunifying with the parents or whoever the caregiver was at that point. Sometimes it's a disrupted permanent guardianship. So sometimes they'll try to work for reunification with that family. So termination of parental rights, that's, the parents aren't making the progress needed to continue with reunification, and it's in the child's best interest to terminate their parents' parental rights in order to be legally free for adoption. Permanent guardianship is permanent. It's similar to adoption in certain ways. In the process of, you still have to get a home study, just like an adoption, a family that's going to be adopting. And you do get a subsidy. Well, kids are eligible for a subsidy just like an adoption, and children are they're eligible for Medicaid until they turn 18. Guardianship is not permanent, and we do it with a known resource or unknown resource. And that's typically for, guardianship is typically for our older kids. We don't use that for a 12-year-old or any youth like that. That's typically for a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, sometimes a 14 or 15-year-old, depending on their circumstances. APLA is for youths 16 and over. You cannot have a permanency goal of APLA prior to turning 16. And we have throughout the years kind of shied away from APLA to our best of ability, because that's just technically meaning you're aging out of care. And we don't want the permanency recruitment to stop because you're 16. With APLA, we still have to continue looking for family. We have to continue looking for resources and making that contact, trying our best, doing our due diligence to make that contact. So those are the different goals. So once PPC changes the goal internally, meaning it hasn't been taken to court yet, we had our PPC changed the goal. So once PPC changes the goal internally within DFS, a permanency case is open for each child. So if it's a sibling group of 3 children, that's 3 different cases. Whereas in treatment, it would be the family and the kids all in one case. So a permanency case is open for each child. The treatment worker on the case prepares a transfer summary for the permanency worker, and the transfer summary entails, the regular, date of birth, where is the child placed, why is the child in care, who are the parents, what's their contact information, doctor's appointment, all their medical stuff, when was their last dental, when was their last physical, when was their last vision appointment, where did they go. So some workers do an excellent job on the transfer summaries. Some you have to do a little bit more digging in the treatment case. But that's that. So typically, the treatment worker at that point, when the goal is changed, so let's say TPR, it's typically TPR and adoption. That treatment worker typically sends an email out to the CASA worker, the CASA coordinator, OCA, our attorney, the therapist, if there's a private agency, the entire team, to say, hey, just letting you guys know, PPC changed the goal. TPR and adoption, Jenitza Johnson's a new permanency worker. She's CC'd in this email. Any further, inquiries, just reach out to Jenitza. It's typically, how we introduce everybody. So once I get a case, I have to make contact with specifically, of course, the child and the caregiver, see where they're at. Within 2 weeks, I have to see that child. If I typically introduce myself to the bio family as well. Hopefully the treatment worker at that point informs the family they're working with that, he or she took the case to PPC, the goal for the child has changed, and now I'm a new member to the team. And I just explain my role in the case when it comes to parents, because I'm not case planning with parents. I'm not doing, my role is specifically for the child. So as long as they hold parental rights, it's my responsibility to make sure that they are informed of everything with the child, when their doctor's appointments are, if anything is going on, educationally, behaviorally. As long as they are active in that case, that's my responsibility, as long as they hold parental rights. So when I get the case, I review the family's case to the best of my ability. Some of these families have a very long history and have many cases. But, each case summarizes the case before that. So just trying to, get a grasp on the family. And I do personally like to make sure I read any evaluations that the child may have had, like a psychological evaluation, psychiatric evaluation, seeing if the child has an IEP, and, that any type of educational needs. So I try to make sure I do all that when getting a case. Once we had the actual permanency hearing and the court changes the child's goal, then lately it's been a lot of concurrent goals, I've noticed, where if DFS is asking for TPR and adoption as the permanency goal and the parents oppose, then I've seen a lot of judges say, we're going to do a concurrent planning where treatment will stay open and continue to work with the family to reunify the child or children with the family. But on this, I'm still doing my part and in permanency and just making sure that if the point of the concurrent is if parents are doing well but then fall off track, our permanency goal of TPR and adoption is still on track, and it doesn't, there's not a lapse in the child's permanency, because we don't want children to stay long in care if they don't have to. So if concurrent, if the goal is concurrent reunification, which is another goal, the visits with the family continue the way they were, the way they are. A lot of them have family interventionists involved, so they continue doing their visits. If the court changes a child's goal to TPR and adoption, visits go down to 2 times a month. But once an adoption petition is filed, it drops down to 1 time a month. So if the judge today grants a goal change of TPR and adoption, and I file that TPR petition tomorrow, then the visits go down to 1 time a month. If I wait to file it, then the visits only go down to 2 until I file that petition. If TPR is granted, at that point, parents may have one last final visit if it's in the best interest of the child. For example, if there was a case where parents, I'm gonna give you one of my cases, parents were not active at all with the reunification process. Children were in care for over a year and didn't have any visitation with the family. Parents show up to the TPR hearing. Parents want a final visit. It wasn't, luckily these children are in therapy. So therapists like, that's not in their best interest. The therapist is like, that's gonna backtrack them, you know? So, so like I said, that if TPR is granted, if it's in the child's best interest, then we will definitely have that visit that I would facilitate. So various services offered. All right, so whoops, there you go. So once I get a case, typically when a case comes to permanency, my supervisor automatically makes the referral for My Life services. My Life stands for My Young Life in Foster Care Explained. A lot of our youths, most of our youths, once they come into our unit, get this service. Their My Life worker speaks to them about, you know, their time in foster care and what that looked like, and their family. And they do a lot of different activities with them. They complete life books that have pictures of family members, their birth certificate, if they have records of their footprints, you know, all this stuff goes in there. So if we have a toddler, let's say, in my unit, they wouldn't get a My Life worker per se, like to do the activities with them, but that My Life worker will do the life book with all that information. So they do have that when they get older. Another service, if the goal is changed to TPR and adoption, we typically refer the child for child-specific recruitment. And you hear that a lot as CSR, a CSR worker. We don't make a referral for CSR workers all of the time, because there's a lot of times where that foster family is interested in adopting the child or children. So we look, you know, at our foster families. We look, there may be a family member. So there's not every child gets a CSR worker, but a lot of them do if we need to recruit for them. So, excuse me, the recruitment worker recruits for, you know, families for the children. They look at different home studies. They look at, they put the children on different websites. They present children at different meetings that they have. So their job is to recruit families for the child or children. So another service we have is family search and engagement. I've had a handful of kids that have used this service, but it typically is used when, let's say there is a disrupted adoption. So a family search and engagement worker would, mine our files and go through and try to pick any type of see who they can get, what family members they can get, who was active in this child's life before adoption. And a lot of the times we think, just because parental rights are terminated, that family is totally gone. Legally the family is no longer their family, but that's still their family. And 5 years down the road, their circumstances may have changed. I had a young lady one time who her parents' parental rights were terminated. Her mother actually had passed away, and there was an aunt that was in her life but could not take care of her, didn't have the financial means to take care of her at the time. Years had passed, and she was still in foster care, and she actually ran into her in one of the stores. The aunt called me and was like, can I have her? I have this, I have this, I have this. I wasn't ready. I didn't have everything I needed then, but I do now. I didn't know she was still in foster care. This aunt stepped up, did a home study, and she adopted her. So she was able to, stay with her family. So that's an example of family search and engagement. Granted, that just wound up happening because they saw each other in the store. But just we've had kids that, it's digging a lot deeper for family members that there's only so much that we could do, but that's a family search and engagement worker. That's their specific job, is to search and use different type of tools, search engines to find this information. And then I just put post-adoption services. That's after a child gets adopted. ABC, A Better Chance for Our Children, and Children's and Families First provide post-adoption services, and that can include, if let's say there's let's say the child becomes a teenager and they're having issues and they need some help, they can always reach out to those agencies to get extra help and different services in place. And that also is valid for permanent guardianship. People who have they were granted permanent guardianship of a child or children. They get the same exact services. Before, it was just only A Better Chance for Our Children that did that, but that has expanded now to Children's and Families First as well. And so right here, Children's Choice, Children's and Families First, and A Better Chance for Our Children, those are the agencies that we use for the My Life, the CSR, Family Search and Engagement, and the post-adoption services. So, okay. So, there's a lot of questions at times about, when a child has a goal of a guardianship with an unknown resource, how do we address that? So a lot of times it's trying to think outside the box. I've had kids that have had supports as teachers, someone in school, a friend's mom, a friend's dad, just thinking just outside the box, for even if it's not a placement, an opportunity for a placement, but for just a bond, someone they can be bonded with and build a healthy relationship with. Sometimes, we get stuck and we don't know where to look anymore. There's no teachers, or there's no one that this child has. So the division now has these permanency roundtable meetings. We call them PRTs. And it's structured just, it doesn't include, it's not like a family team meeting that has, therapists and everybody involved. It's specifically with different agency workers, the DFS worker. There's been times where CASA workers have participated. Usually OCA will also participate, but it's a lot of the different agencies that I had mentioned prior, it's Children's Families First, Children's Choice, ABC, to try to brainstorm and see, well, what about, just it, being just throwing ideas out there, like, well, what about this person? Well, this person was close with them 5 years ago. Maybe that person's still interested, or just trying to find supports for children, just trying our best to, think outside the box, and, other workers from the other agency workers throw out different ideas that were helpful for them in other cases. So it's very structured. It's a 2-hour meeting, and it's very structured. They spend a certain amount of time with introductions, a certain amount of time talking about, it's very structured. So that also helps, and it helps to try to overcome some of the barriers, that we have looking for permanency for our youth. So, and those are held once or twice a month, I believe.
Jenitza, can I ask a question?
Sure.
How, in your experience with the permanency roundtables, how successful do you feel they are in terms of identifying potential resources?
So I personally have only had like 1 or 2. I haven't had to bring, thank goodness, haven't had to bring lots of cases to the permanency roundtable. And the main specific one that really sticks out in my head is that this youth had a lot of, he's been in care for a very long time. He was adopted when he was little, and then that adoption disrupted. He was with that adopted family for like 10 years. And then he came into care, and he was institutionalized since, because he had a lot of mental health issues. So he was from different residential treatment centers to different. I traveled so much for this young man, so it's just that we took it. We took it to the permanency roundtable. Like, what do we do? Like, he didn't know his biological family. The only family he knew was his adopted family. And that family was no longer together. The parents had divorced. One was here, one was there, the sisters, everyone who he considered his family, that everyone was everywhere. So with this specific youth, we did put the family search and engagement service in there. And she did a lot of research, like a lot of it. But then at that point, he was in another county. And then so we wound up transferring the case. So I'm not quite sure whatever came from that. But I know Kim was the FSC worker, and she did a lot of work on that. So I'm not quite sure how that one went.
Gotcha. Thanks. It's such an interesting idea about a permanency roundtable, of just sitting down and just tossing out ideas and just openly chatting about it. And then I like what you said too about revisiting people that may have been investigated or contacted, when the child first came into DFS custody, but some time has lapsed, and sometimes some of those folks' life situations have changed and might be available now where they might not have been in the past.
Indeed. And I think a lot of the times, especially when I first started, like, you get stuck on, well, that's not their family anymore. You know what I mean? Like, parental rights are terminated, or this person wasn't, but as I've been there so long, it makes sense. It all just makes sense. Because, where I was 5 years ago doesn't mean that's where I'm at right now. So we like to revisit that.
Cool.
So,
and interesting that the fact that, I thought permanency was, you said adoption and termination of parental rights, that child would come back into care after such a long period of time.
Yes. So this young man came in, he had a lot of mental health issues where safety was concerned.
Okay.
His safety, the family safety. And when there's in this specific case, there was younger siblings in the home, and it wasn't safe for the children.
Okay.
So, okay. So other services are independent living services. So this doesn't technically have to be they're in permanency, so they get this. They can be in treatment or investigations and also receive independent living services. So independent living services, a youth has to be 16 years old. So once they turn 16 years old, we make the referral for them. Each county, we only have 3, but each county has different agencies for that they use. So here in Kent County, our agency we use Murphy School. So once youths turn 16 years old, we make the referral for them for independent living services. If a youth is adopted or guardianship or permanent guardianship is granted after the youth turns 16, he or she is also eligible for independent living services. So if a youth today turns 16 today and his adoption is tomorrow, he is eligible for independent living services. Now, independent living services are the youth can have them until they're 21 years old. Mm-hmm. DFS does not have to be, clearly we're not involved with 21-year-olds, but DFS does not have to be involved in order for them to receive these services. When they first start with independent living services at 16, it's a lot of resume building. It's a lot of, seeking, looking for jobs and things like that. That first year, it's not too much work for them. It's when they turn 17. So when they turn 17, we'll have a steps meeting, which I will review, and I believe it's in the next slide. But each youth has to take a financial literacy course. And when they turn 18, they receive assist funds. Assist stands for Achieving Self-Sufficiency and Independence Through Supported Transition. So they get the assist funds once they turn 18, not prior. And the assist funds, help them with the rent if they're not with DFS custody anymore. It can help them with the rent, with their phone bill, insurance, car payment, bills, just whatever they have, it helps them with. If they're, like I said, if they're not in DFS custody, then they can also get some of that money for rent. If they are in DFS custody, they don't get that money because DFS is still paying. If they're on a board extension, DFS is still paying for their room and board. So if they decide not to take a board extension, independent living services can assist in finding housing, through a voucher or transitional housing. And I know Murphy School here in Kent County has, on their campus, they have the transition home for the boys. They just purchased a building in Dover to make one for the girls. So they can help out in a lot of ways. Like I said, they can receive independent living services until the age of 21. And also if they move to Pennsylvania, independent living services can transfer. So not transfer like they're going to get Murphy School, but whoever their independent living worker is here in Delaware will contact whatever agency that is in that state and set that up for the youth. It may not have, each state's, what they provide through independent living services is different. So it would all depend where the youth is going, but wherever they move, they can get those services. Steps meeting. So STEPS stands for the Stairways to Encourage Personal Success. Every youth has a STEPS meeting once they turn 17 years old. It's a meeting to develop a transitional plan that will assist them after they exit care. The STEPS meeting must be held within 30 days after the youth turning 17, no matter what the goal is. If they're in treatment and they turn 17, within 30 days, they need to have a STEPS meeting. So the steps meeting, it includes whoever the youth wants to invite, whoever they feel that if they want to invite their buddy Joe, because that's a support to them, Joe can come. They want to invite their aunt, that aunt can come. We invite whoever the youth wants to invite. Also, of course, is DFS, independent living, their CASA worker or attorney, whoever, the main, that's like the main team, but whoever they want to invite, they can invite. And at that meeting, we discuss what's the plan looking like when you turn 18. Some kids like, I want to get out of DFS care. I don't want nothing to do with DFS. Okay, well, how can I help you get there? What do you need? Where do you want to go? You know, you want to go live with your Aunt Susie over in Alabama. How are you going to get there? How can we help you get there once you turn 18? So it's all, you know, it's their plan. It's what they want and how, you know, what resources we have available to get them there. We discuss education, where they are educationally, what their goals are educationally. We discuss medically, you know, if they're in therapy or if they're on, you know, medication, like med management. Transportation, do you have a license? Can we get you a license? What can we do? So if they have, some kids have legal issues. Are you still going to be on probation when you turn 18? What's the conditions of your probation still going to be? And just trying to come up with a plan. You know, this is what you want and this is what we're going to work towards. So that happens 30 days after they turn, but within 30 days of them turning 17. And at the end of that steps meeting, we'll schedule another date. This date is for an exit meeting. And the exit meeting is to occur around 90 days prior to the youth turning 18. At this exit meeting, we discuss the steps plan. You know, where are we? We just review it and what are the next steps? So we are reviewing the actual steps plan, but it's called an exit meeting. So if the youth is granted a board extension, then we will have another exit meeting 90 days prior to the planned exit date, if it was more than 6 months from the initial exit meeting. So if they turned 18, let's say in May, and they graduate in June, we don't need another exit meeting because it's only a month that they're on that board extension. But if they turned 18 in September and it's their senior year and they're staying until they graduate, that's more than 6 months, we'll have to have another exit meeting. Once again, 90 days prior to the planned exit date, which is usually graduation.
And during this time, the permanency worker is really kind of overseeing this, but other resources or services are being used to implement this plan and help the youth implement this plan.
So yeah, so DFS helps, but one of the main key components is the independent living worker.
Okay.
That's the key person, you know, helping the youth with the resources. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, but at this point, there's no court, there's nothing. It's mainly service oriented for the youth. Then, for the youth,
Well,
their life.
Not all the time. So you actually just brought up a great subject that I didn't make a slide for. So that's an extended jurisdiction. Okay. So a youth, once they turn 18, they can say, I don't want to come to court no more. They can tell their attorney, I'm done. I don't want to go to court anymore. And then so they wouldn't get extended jurisdiction. So that's, at that point, court's done. For example, I have a youth that turned 18 last November. He wanted a board extension, but did not want extended jurisdiction. So we haven't had to go to court. But there's other youths who want to continue going to court. And that's the extended jurisdiction. So if they are 18 and on, you know, they wanted extended jurisdiction, their attorney filed whatever paperwork they had to do, then they have a court hearing approximately every 6 months. And DFS is not responsible for giving that update. At that point, it is the independent living worker who gives the updates to the courts.
And that's based on what? I mean, what are they, I mean, I'm just a little confused. Okay, they still want to be part of the court. Is the court deciding, what are they deciding on at this?
They just make sure that they're getting all the services that they need. They're getting the medical attention that they need, the educational need, if they have any needs, and just updating the court of what's been going on with the youth.
Now, how many, I mean, in terms of your experience, how many kids, how many youth are in this kind of a situation?
I currently don't, do I have any in right now? I have so many, what I'm thinking. I don't have, no, I had the one youth that's on a board extension, but he's not, he didn't take it. I've had other youths take it, and it's only twice a year, their court hearing.
Okay.
So it's not often, it's not like a review hearing that we go every 3 months for. Typically twice a year. And I've actually had a handful of kids take it, like, and go for it. And, some kids like seeing judges, some don't.
And how long is this until?
I'm not even quite sure. I know it's a couple years they can do. I'm not quite sure what the age is with that when extended jurisdiction.
It is 21. Yep, it ends at 21. And Joyce said extended jurisdiction is totally voluntary. It's something that they want to do because at that point they are adults. And the purpose of extended jurisdiction is to keep the court and the CASA involved. And like Jenitza said, the court hearings are usually twice a year. They're usually scheduled every 6 months. And the purpose is to oversee independent living services and give the youth, I'll call them now a young adult, a support system to kind of double check that they are receiving anything that they're entitled to receive, because once they turn 18, Division of Family Services is finished and they have just an independent living worker. Sometimes DFS stays involved a little bit, but like their main source of support is that independent living worker. So the purpose of keeping the court and CASA involved is that there's a kind of second layer just to make sure that the youth is receiving what they are, what they're entitled to.
Okay.
Thanks, Lauren. So that's the steps. Let's see. Okay, so when a youth exits foster care, and okay, so when I made this, I'm thinking they're turning 18 and exiting foster care. So we provide them with an exit packet. In this exit packet is a letter, an official letter from us documenting that the youth was in foster care. Sometimes they need that for like different scholarships or proof of whatever that they need, saying that they were in foster care. They get an original birth certificate, their social security card, a state ID or license. Now that one's a little tricky because my kids me personally on my caseload, when they turn 14 years old, I take them to the DMV to get a state ID. 14, 15 years old, I feel like you need your state ID. You need identification if you're going out for a walk, if you're bike riding somewhere. It's just you need a form of ID. So I take all of my kids to get that, to get a state ID. The license is kind of tricky because it varies from child to child and their situations as far as our policy goes with youths in foster care getting their license. So that one kind of varies. We give them their Medicaid card and whatever documents that they need. I type up I usually get it from their child plan, but this is where you go to the doctors. This is their address. This is their phone number. This is the last time you went. This is when you need a next one. So I type it all out for them so they have a hard copy of what they need to do. Where'd I go to the dentist? Look at the paper I gave you. It has everything on. I give them all the information that they need, because even when they're on a board extension, I can't call the doctor's office, say, hey, when was the last time he was at the doctor's? They're 18. Mm-hmm. Unless they sign consent for me to get that information, I can't get it. So they are responsible. Once they turn 18, they are responsible for making their own appointments. Independent living also works with them in, showing them how to do that as well. Recent credit report. So every youth in foster care, once they turn 14 years old, it automatically generates. They each get, every year they get an updated credit report. Well, we get an updated credit report for the youth, just to make sure that there's no activity on their social security number. Thankfully, I've never had an issue where there was any type of fraudulent activity. One of my girls did have activity. I'm like, whoa, what's this? She's like, oh, I tried to open up a credit card. I said, oh, and you get denied 3 times because it's 3 different stores. She said, yeah. I said, don't do that. so all our youths, once they turn 14. So typically I like to have a nice fresh credit report when I have a STEPS meeting, because I also give it to them at the STEPS meeting, because that's one of the things that we discuss. Credit and financial stuff, So at the exit packet, we give them the most recent credit report. I tell them their social security numbers on it. Do not let anybody see this. A lot of the time I offer it to my kids when they're 14, 15, but I let them know that you don't have any use for this. So I can just keep it. So your number doesn't go floating around if you're moving from house to house, if you're, if some cases where kids, have disruptions, but nope, just keep it. Okay. But I always have it if they need it. But when in their exit packet, they have a recent copy of it. Excuse me. And I also give them records there if they have, a current IEP or 504 plan, their latest report card, just so they have it. A lot of my kids, they really don't care about their IEPs. They're like, it is what it is, but here it is. You can't, here it is, you have it. And that's what I do. That's when they exit care. And I don't do this when they turn, I do this when they're actually exiting, not when they're like on a board extension. If they need their social security card or birth certificate or something like for employment reasons, I give it to them and they have to give it back to me. Because I want to make sure that they have it when they do exit care, especially with social security cards, because I think you only get like 10 copies in your entire life. And if you lose it, then you have to order another one. So, I keep everything at the office. And that's the end of my slide. Oh, there you go.
Awesome. So Jenitza, this was great. So I just have a couple of questions just to kind of ask a little bit more.
Okay.
So how do you as a permanency worker interact with your partner agencies? So for example, the independent living workers, a child-specific recruitment worker, a family search and engagement worker. What are some techniques that you use to kind of stay in touch with those partners?
Email. Email is my best friend. Just because my phone it's just, I'm always going to check email. I always check my email. Now it might get buried a little bit, but my workers already know if I don't respond within a certain amount of time, hey, Jenitza, just following up with this. I'm like, oh yeah. So I feel like I have a great relationship with most of the people I work with, all my private agency workers. And my therapist, I feel like even, further than that, OCA and YRS and PBH, like there's so much to a team. And I just try my best to keep everybody in the loop. That's why I like the email. So I can just put everybody in there. If there's a disruption or anything, everybody's aware.
Gotcha. Kind of going off that, what's the best way for CASA volunteers to communicate with you?
With me, email.
Yeah, perfect.
Email. I mean, they call me and stuff too, but it's with my role, it's kind of difficult for me sometimes because I actually just had this happen about 2 months ago. So I was a teleworker prior to COVID. Mm-hmm. So that means I don't have a desk phone number. Mm-hmm. So it's just my cell. So, but if you call the main office, sometimes they will transfer you to my old desk number. Mm-hmm. And I don't get those messages.
Oh.
I don't get those messages. So email is always, me personally, emails.
Gotcha. I always like those too, because left to my own memory, I'm not going to remember what we talked about. But if you write it down, I go, oh yeah, we did agree on that. Or, oh yeah, we did.
To go back on and stuff. So yes, I prefer email.
Excellent. And then when you are working with, I'll stick with adoption or like permanent guardianship or guardian, what are some of the things you do to kind of get to know that potential family?
So we just, well, if it's a foster family that's adopting or doing the permanent guardianship, at that point, I'm already, you know, I meet with the kids at minimum once a month. Um, Sometimes more than that, especially now that we could do virtual. Like I've been seeing my kids a whole lot more. So just, you know, just constant communication. Once, let's say it's an adoptive family that is not one of my foster families. It's a new family to us. We have lots of team meetings, lots of team meetings, and you know, to include the entire team, because I think a lot of our kids are in therapy. So I think it's important to make sure that you know what that transition will look like, that the youth is aware of it, that what the families, what their expectations are, because sometimes their expectations may be different from ours. Um, Example, I just had one not too long ago that it was a family from another state. Um, and I had a couple red flags, and me and the CSR worker and the attorney were like, we're not sure. And I was supposed to present the family to PPC that morning. I said, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I can't. And I just couldn't. I, you know, spoke to the attorney, and they're like, Jenitza, we trust you. I said, all right, I'm not doing it. So it's just the constant communication and making sure that, you know, everyone's on the same page. And if they're not on the same page and not willing to be everyone being on the same page, it's maybe not the best fit.
Mhm. And that makes me think too. So what if you do have a red flag about a particular family? What are some of the things, like, do you communicate that directly with that family, or is there kind of a different way to address that?
So that family would have their own worker in that state, whatever state they're in. They would have the workers. So it's typically myself and the recruitment worker speaking with their worker. Actually, in the case that I was just telling you about, that worker also had red flags. So that just sealed the deal for me. But yeah, it's just a lot of the times, if it's a concern about the family, then we talk to their worker about that. Just like if there was a concern about one of my families, I would, you know, talk to the family about that.
Gotcha. How, in your experience with the permanency unit, how often have you had more than one family interested in an adoption for one particular child? Like how often have you done an adoption selection where there was more than one option?
Only twice.
Okay.
Only twice. And one of them was an older, she was like 13. So what the CSR worker did was she presented, we had three families to the youth, and the youth made her selection. And so when we presented it to PPC, we let them know this is what the youth wants, and they're not going to go against what the kid wants. So they're like, perfect.
That's neat. That's cool if that happened.
Yeah. So, and they're doing well. So
good. Wonderful. So when you so I'm trying to think of, all right, so when in 2014, when the Sex Trafficking Act that prevented APLA from being a plan from anybody under the age of 16, what were some of the things you did? Like at that time, I know we had, you know, through 2015 to kind of implement this permanency plan change. Of all the caseload you had during that time, what were some of the things you did to identify the kids that were on your caseload that were under 16 that did have APLA as a plan? And then what did you do to change those plans?
I was a treatment worker at that time, so
good for you.
So I didn't have to do anything. I think it's right after that is when I transitioned into being a permanency worker.
Gotcha. All right.
Well, a lot of the goals changed to, there was youth that had like, at 14 years old had an APLA goal, and they changed those goals. I don't know what the process that they used to determine it, but a lot of those youth goals changed to the guardianship with unknown resource.
Gotcha. Okay. And in your experience, have you ever had a situation where parental rights were reinstated.
Yes.
Awesome. Can you explain kind of briefly kind of how that worked? And what actually, how, if you can actually back up a little bit, how can parental rights be reinstated?
All right. So I think this family was the very first one in Delaware that it happened to. So I was working with the youth. Parental rights were terminated when she was young. I want to say maybe 8, 9, 10. It was way before me. Parental rights were terminated. Father was incarcerated. Mother protected dad rather than protecting her. Years passed. I mean, she was adopted, actually, I believe. She had a failed adoption. I'm remembering this stuff off the top of my brain because
Totally catching you off guard too by
I believe she had a failed adoption, and then she didn't want to be adopted. She was in communication with her mom. You know, nowadays it's so easy for our kids to, find everybody with technology. So she was talking with mom. I'm glad you brought this up because I was just talking to her the other day. So the attorney filed to reinstate mom's parental rights. At that point, DFS opposed it. It was super brand new. It was like, no, not happening. Like we opposed it. The judge did not grant it at that point. But this mom was so involved and she did not give up. The youth was placed in Dover. Mom lived in Sussex County. She drove from Sussex County to Dover to pick her up and take her to therapy every single week. Wow. And also participated in therapy and took her here and took her to the mall. Like she was doing her visits. And why did the case I forget why the case transferred. She was no longer mine. So one of her, this kind of goes back to the barriers and trying to find a resource for a youth. So this youth specific, she was, her school was in Sussex, and she made friends with the teacher there. That teacher was interested in having her placed with her. So we did the home assessment. We did everything. We met her family, her husband, her children, walked them through what it would look like, what the responsibilities would be. And they were all for it. So that's why I transferred, because she changed counties. So then a few months later, I don't know the specifics of it, but that disrupted. So I wasn't the worker at this time. So she wound up coming back up to Kent County when that disrupted, and mom continued. Even while she was placed at the teacher's house, mom continued this entire time. So I want to say like a good 2 years passed, and the child's attorney filed to reinstate parental rights again. And I guess it was as long, I wish I was there for the hearing, but I wasn't, but it was a big deal. And the judge reinstated mom's parental rights. So I have a Facebook page that I have my personal one and I have my work one. On my work one, I have a lot of my kids on there. So I remained in contact. I try my best to remain in contact with them if they want to be in contact with me. So I remember I went to her 8th grade graduation. And while I was her worker, I went to her 8th grade graduation. She just graduated high school. And, she was all excited, and her mom contacted me, invited me to a barbecue. She's like, thank you for everything. I'm like, I was like, I'm on vacation. Sorry. I was like, but I told mom, I was like, I admire you. I admire that you did not give up and that you continued to be there for her and, provide everything for her. And I was about to say her name. She is super happy at home with mom, and she graduated high school. So definitely, definitely super happy for them.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting process. I know, we've only had it happen a handful of times in Delaware. I know I had a case in Sussex not long ago where we did reinstate parental rights. But it's an interesting option for the right family at the right time. So, when parental rights are terminated, there's always a ground for termination of parental rights, either abandonment or failure to plan or consent, but that child will stay in DFS custody while they're working on some other plan. And by nature, that might take 2 years or more. And part of the Delaware statute is that the parental rights have to have been terminated over 2 years ago. So that time kind of plays out a little bit. And then fast forward 2 years or more, and that parent might be in a very different space in their life than they were 2 years prior. So good for your youth for finding her mom. I mean, these kids really can find a lot of people, which is cool. That happened in my case too, as a young man who found his dad through Facebook, which at that point, I think you still used Facebook at that time. I don't know if they do anymore, but Jenitza, do you find that most of your youth are pretty resourceful when it comes to finding potential options for themselves?
When they want something, they'll go do what they have to do to, whether it's family, whatever it is. These kids, if they have their head stuck on something that they're going to, even if it's not in their best interest, they're going to do it because they want to do it. Gotcha. So yes, they're very resourceful when they want to be.
Cool. What is your general caseload right now? I know that the treatment worker, or I think it was the treatment worker, right, that said that they had pretty much, once they're assigned cases, they said that I don't know, I think at one time she had 40 or something like that, but then since COVID, I mean, everything is pared down, it's a little bit more manageable and all that stuff. So generally, what is your caseload?
Currently, it's wonderful. Currently, I have 13 kiddos, I think. One of my coworkers is leaving, so I'm gaining 2 of her kids. But currently, I think all around right now in DFS, our numbers are manageable, but I remember specifically my son is 3.5, me going out on maternity leave, having 33 cases. That's 33 kids to be responsible for. So I think the cap is supposed to be 18. And all of us, my entire unit, we're holding over 30 cases.
Do you feel that, yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, just in terms of being able to provide any support to any family, like that's a challenge. Do you feel that at 13, like that's a pretty good number, like that you're comfortable with that? You feel like you can connect with all your youth and provide services and you feel good about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
I had a question with regard to that scenario that you just mentioned to us about the young student that came back, reunited with a parent. And you guys mentioned DFS still having custody. When she had that failed adoption, what brought up, so that DFS retains custody no matter what in terms of permanency when they go?
Okay, so when a youth is adopted, so let me rewind a little bit. So when TPR is granted, DFS holds parental rights. We hold parental rights until an adoption occurs, and then we transfer parental rights to the family. And DFS is no longer involved. But if a family rescinds they can't do it, and they rescind their adoption, and the child comes back in, that we get the parental rights back. It comes back to us once, because they're going to have to terminate their parental rights, because they go through the process just like they were birth parents and would have to terminate their parental rights for us we would get custody. 9 times out of 10, they're going to consent to terminate the parental rights, and then we get our parental rights back. And I actually I have currently a case that we hold parental rights of a youth, and his foster family at the time was granted permanent guardianship of him and his brother. And he wound up coming back into care. The family rescinded their permanent guardianship just for him, because his behaviors were uncontrollable for them. So he wound up coming back into care, and we still hold parental rights because it was a permanent guardianship that was granted, not an adoption. So we still are responsible for him.
I think I kind of was aware of something like that, and that's why I asked you, because when one of my first cases that I was possibly going to be assigned, that was the scenario, just like what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't, grasp, because I'm a new CASA, and I thought permanency was permanency, that you're done, and that's it. But it's not that way.
Unfortunately, I've seen a handful of disrupted adoptions and placements like that.
And on the flip side, sorry, a biological parent can rescind their own custody. So, a parent can call DFS and say, I'm done, come get them. Or what happens is a child will enter into the juvenile justice system and have pending charges. The youth might attend their court hearing and there's no parent. And so then DFS gets involved that way, and the parent might be unwilling to reunify. So it is just as easy for a biological parent as an adoptive parent to rescind their custody.
But when I was in treatment, I always said it's easy for these kids to come into care, but it's hard for them to get back because, parents don't want to do what they gotta, you know what I mean? Just they don't want to do what they have to do to, a lot of parents think, well, I did this check, I did this check, but it's not a checklist. It's your behaviors. How are your behaviors affecting it? Okay, you went to a substance abuse class. Are you still getting high in front of your kid? Are you still falling asleep and your 2-year-old's walking out the door? That's not a behavior change. Just because you went to that class doesn't mean that the child's ready to come home to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in that case, the status, they come back in terms of, depending on what age they are, that determines what their status is. Like you mentioned, APLA or something like that. So then you go back to the state, go back to the beginning in terms of a plan, a child plan, or is this now this, what is that other?
It varies.
Permanency, the PPC thing again?
PPC is the one, I don't get to select what a child's permanency plan is. It's the recommendation from the Permanency Planning Committee, and the court ultimately makes the goal change. So when a youth re-enters care, we're just re-entering. So let's say it's a failed adoption.
Yeah.
The goal automatically is reunification, because it's still their parents until we go through the TPR, until they consent to terminate the parental rights. That's what the goal is. But for the young man that I was just talking about, that we already held parental rights, that case is different because it went straight from investigations. Typically would go investigations, treatment, permanency. His case specifically went from investigation to permanency because we already hold parental rights.
Okay.
But that's not typical, thank goodness.
And then at that point, that's when you're looking at services and all that kind of different services. Like you say, I don't know how the child was. If he was 14 or 15, then that would be maybe you look at terms of independent living services and stuff like that for that child.
The IL service is at 16, not at 15, but at 16. And this youth, actually, I had him prior when he was in care, so I already knew his history and all that stuff. So that's why I got him back. So as far as services, he already did the My Life. He already got those services before. So right now it's and speaking out loud, I'm like, oh, we should put family search and engagement in there. So, because we don't know where dad is, and mom's deceased. So, so he right now doesn't receive any. He's 16 now, so he does receive IL services.
So again, it's like looking for resources, support resources for him, teacher, brother, relative, or whatever.
Yes, and he does have, this specific youth does have family around that he's in contact with.
Yeah.
It's just finding one that can be a resource for him.
Resource. Okay.
Awesome, Jenitza, I think that wraps it up. Is there anything else you want to share? I think you covered it pretty well, and thank you for doing the PowerPoint. That was pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, no, well, you're welcome. I wanted to keep myself focused.
I love it. Well, I think this wraps up our training. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.